Going Back in Time, a virtual tour of Deposit based on vintage photos and stories from Strolling Through Time and Passing the Time, published by the Deposit Historical Society. We begin at Deposit's first bank building, now our main museum. It was built for Charles Knapp circa 1872. It resembles a small Italian villa. Fasten your virtual seatbelts as we head west on 2nd to Allen. 2nd Street features our beautiful churches and many pre-Civil War Greek Revival homes. Nearly all of these buildings survive, so look for them next time you are strolling through town. On the right, you see the bank building before it was renovated by the Historical Society. Be sure to visit our House Museum, a Greek Revival home once owned by Civil War Dr. Oliver T. Bundy, and step into the doctor's office for a checkup. Dr. Bundy with his dog. Dr. Bundy had been a surgeon in the 144th Regiment during the Civil War. The museum has many Civil War artifacts, and don't miss the picture of Dr. Bundy in his Civil War uniform. In the foreground, Soldiers' Monument, honoring our Civil War heroes. It was dedicated on September 27, 1888. Dr. Bundy was responsible for spearheading the effort to build the monument. Next to the Bundy House is the Baptist Church and the Presbyterian Church left. This is the fourth building for each denomination, and each built for less than $10,000. The Presbyterian Church has lost its steeple. Otherwise, these buildings remain intact. Christ Church, a lovely stone church built in 1893. Our Episcopal Church resembles many Anglican churches you might find in rural England. Church bells and school bells could be heard on 2nd Street. In 1867, the first school was built on the corner of 2nd and Center, the Deposit Academy, with its turreted towers. Who are those guys on the steps? The towered school was demolished in 1882 to make way for this larger building. Let's meet a few students of this school. Members of the First Ladies Basketball Team circa 1902, Ethel Stone and Ethel Post. Those bloomers were something of a shock to the villagers. Notice that the ladies' legs are visible all the way down from the knee. Good grief! The third school building on the same site, this one in brick. First known as the Deposit High School, later used as the elementary school, before it was left vacant and subject to the ravages of time and neglect. Let's peek inside. Women's basketball takes center court in the new school, still wearing those lovely bloomers. The 70-piece Deposit Concert Band 1919, playing in the auditorium of the brick school building. Deposit's first track team, 1934. Standing left is Fred Fox, coach. Seated left is Helen Cookie Winand, later Bill Rinker's wife, Second from right is Albert Sonny Steinman, a Wheeler descendant. Betty and Orrin Briggs are in the picture, second from left in both rows. A little detour to 4th Street, the Pine Grove School, circa 1853. This school predates the schools built on the corner of 2nd and Center. It later became the Deposit Manufacturing Company, commonly called the Sled Factory. One of their sleds is on display in our front room. This building is now used as a residence. A plaque identifies it. Laurel Bank Seminary, circa 1854, now the site of the Laurel Bank Cemetery. Possibly the most magnificent building ever built in Deposit. It burned to the ground the morning of September 6, 1869. This school's short but storied past is documented in Passing the Time, including a letter from a student written to his parents in Binghamton. Back on 2nd Street, the Methodist Church prior to 1896. How many changes can you see? This picture shows 2 steeples and 3 front doors. The center Gothic window has been lowered to make way for a round Star of David stained glass window, donated in 1897 by Jacob Basson, a local Jewish merchant, in gratitude for letting the local Jewish families use the church on Saturday for synagogue. St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church, built in 1851, is the oldest church building in Deposit. This quintessential little white church was built for many Irish immigrants who came here to work for the Erie Railroad. McClowery Trucking in front of 92 2nd Street. This home is an excellent example of Greek Revival architecture. Who are those guys? What are they hauling? Notice the backs of the buildings on Church Street. Let's go around the corner to see the fronts. Here we are, 4th through 16th Church Street, known as the Wickwire Block. Sadly, these cottages have lost many of their decorative elements. Built by A.S. Wickwire, who had a press and bookbinding business where Frank's Garage now sits, off Mill Street, behind the Chinese restaurant. Here it is. The Wickwire bookbinding plant did book and magazine binding for Outing Publishing, which we will visit later on our virtual trip back in time. Back to Church Street. Directly across from the Wickwire cottages, the Moran House, built circa 1908, a modern 25-room hotel with telephones in every room, electric lights, and steam heat. Demolished circa 1983. Now a vacant lot behind A to Z. Going back up to 2nd Street, we can see the Moran House. The Cozy Corner tea room is on the ground floor of another fine Greek Revival home. You can easily recognize this home today. A Dean family home circa 1848, originally situated on Front Street, moved to 2nd Street to make room for the bank parking lot. This is a full-blown Greek Revival, not settling for just pilasters, but magnificent fluted pillars. John Ogden built this for Artemus Dean, a grandson of early settlers Captain Nathan Dean and Lois Snow Dean. Portraits of Nathan and Lois hang in the museum. But, alas, Mrs. Artemis Dean was unhappy with the small side staircase and had her husband build 78 2nd Street just across the street. This is Mrs. Artemis Dean's dream house. Note the center doorway that opens to her center staircase and the captain's walk, unusual for this area. It has served as Putnam's tourist home and now the Zacharias funeral home. Back across the street, this served as the Kays and Guy funeral home in the 1950s. Note the octagonal columns, not quite full-blown, as the second story is a bit short. Nevertheless, a very lovely Greek Revival home. 71 2nd Street. This was built by Darius Maples, a prosperous lumberman of Cannonsville, for his daughter, Emily Maples Judson. Her family owned the house for 3 generations. The porch would have been added later. 55 2nd Street, corner of Allen. At one time, this home was owned by Ross and Adelaide Clearwater, who owned the Forest Park Hotel on Aquagga Lake, later known as the Aqua Lodge. This lovely fence was typical of many deposit homes. Now, we will head down to Front Street, because that's where the action is, now that the railroad has come to town. The first Erie Depot. This picture was probably taken when President Fillmore and Daniel Webster came to town to celebrate the completion of the Erie Railroad tracks, which broke ground in Deposit in 1835. This depot was built in 1861 and demolished by Conrail in March 1981 without any warning, much to the dismay of many history-minded Depositonians. With the coming of the railroad, Deposit saw the building of many hotels on Front Street. They are all gone now, but thanks to artists, photographers, and PowerPoint, we can visit them. A sketch of the Western House Hotel circa 1870, corner of Front and Allen, where Wilson's Children's Center is. See the choo-choo train? That barn in the back may still be there. Note the roof line and see what happens to it when the hotel is enlarged. The Western House has now become the Exchange Hotel. Note the added gabled 5th story. In 1921, the glass factory was on this corner. Deposit's Big 3 hotels and movable bandstand on Front Street. They all burned to the ground in the Great Fire of 1903. The Central House to the left, McNaught House center, Aquagga House on the right. They were on Front Street from Allen Street east, roughly Cousins, the empty lot, and the laundromat. Take note of the movable bandstand. It will show up later. Central House, built circa 1850, all gussied up for visiting firemen. That's William Lloyd in front of his barber shop. October 27, 1900. Teddy Roosevelt in front of the Aquagga House as he stumped for presidential candidate McKinley and himself for vice president. Loomis House, Deposit's largest hotel, built right after the fire of 1903. The Erie Depot is in the foreground. Note the second and third floor verandas. The upper black hole is the carriage passageway. The lower black hole is Bone Creek passing under the hotel. Let's step inside. at the Loomis house during an outing company dance circa 1905. Must be a chilly night, the way they are all gathered around that radiator. Meeting summer guests at the depot. Horse-drawn Surreys and international chain-drive cars met all first-class trains and transported guests to the various hotels of Aquaga Lake and Stylesville on the Delaware. '77 Front Street, the Vale Block. Built in 1869 for Clarence Vale, who sold wallpaper on the left. Edick and Maston had a dry goods store on the right. It was demolished February 29, 1996. It's the lot between TDS and the laundromat. The Deposit Band on Front Street near the Vale Block, circa 1899. Note the dresses in the window. Is that Mr. Edick or Mr. Maston watching the parade? Front Street, looking east, circa 1898. Little Italy is on the far right. A little barber shop, the second building on the left, burned in January 1955, but we are lucky to be able to go back in time and visit with the barber. Laverne Green's Barber Shop, circa 1916. Laverne Pop Green is on the right and McKinley Beagle left. Every customer has his own mug. Decorations for the Firemen's Convention, June 1900. The arch is on Front Street near the corner of Church. Note the bandstand. We are looking west, A to Z building on the right, bank turrets in view. Photo by A.P. Davis. Brown's Block, decorated for a firemen's convention circa 1900. The drugstore, founded in 1847 and still going strong, occupied the right side of the building at the time of this photo. Note the post office is in the center portion of the building. Village Hall with bell tower as built on Front Street, 1899. In those days, the fire engines were in the hall. Note the large doors. I think the man on the building is ringing the fire bell. Stowe House, 159 Front Street. The deposit-free library now occupies this site. The Stowe family of deposit courier fame bequeathed the property to the deposit-free library. Flooding is nothing new to Deposit. This is the flood in the spring of 1900. The village garage and recycle bins in this area now. Another picture of Front Street during a flood. We are looking east toward Butler Brook. The large building in the center is the old marble and granite monument work. A stage on Division Street, 1902, in front of Knapp's Meat Market. The stage owned and driven by Hobart Adams. This little building has housed many businesses and in 2011 opened as Butterfield's Cafe. 1 River Street, built in the Federal style, the oldest standing building in Deposit, also known as the Rookery. This is one of the 12 original houses when the village was incorporated in 1811. J.T. Burroughs Store, corner of Main and Broad, now Pine, circa 1895. This is now Hornbeck's Sport Shop. Before we see the next picture, look closely at the left side of this shot. We turn the corner onto Main Street and see a Greek Revival home attached to the store. The house portion of the building was only recently demolished. 1 Main Street, circa 1894, a Queen Anne home built by J.T. Burroughs and later the home of his son-in-law, George Demone. Yet the family no longer had to live behind the store. It was demolished in the 1930s to make way for a gas station. Video Village is the most recent occupant of this corner. Although this Queen Anne home is gone, let's visit two that still stand. 15 Clark Street, circa 1896, deposits most magnificent example of a full-blown Queen Anne home, complete with a third-story half-moon porch, recently painted in period-appropriate colors. Definitely worth a look. 48 Dean Street, 1907. A Queen Anne style but showing colonial revival influences, so popular at the time. This combination of styles is sometimes referred to as neo-colonial, built by J.J. Bell of the Deposit Seed Company. Back on Main Street, we see many pre-Civil War homes. Most are still standing and in very good repair. Learn more about them in Strolling Through Time. And the most famous is the Wheeler Homestead at 20 Main Street, an 1813 Greek Revival house built by William Deacon Bill Wheeler. The Wheelers were among the first families of the village. Wheeler descendants still visit Deposit and have contributed many notable artifacts to the museum. And here are William Deacon Bill Wheeler and his wife Eleanor Knox, the founders of the Deposit Wheelers. A portrait of their daughter Melina hangs in the Evelyn Wheeler Steinman room of our main museum, the Bank Building. The family piano and a map drawn by Melina are also in that room. Their youngest son, George Downs, became a prominent citizen, and his autobiography was published by the Society. Why is George's middle name the same as his wife's maiden name? That and Deposit's early history is all in his autobiography. Let's go to the fair. It's just up the street. A harness race at the Deposit Union Agriculture Society Fairgrounds, circa 1890. Fair Street and the Meadow Park Apartments now occupy this space. The Outing Publishing Plant at the end of Cottage Street, now 2nd Street. Deposit Central High School on this site. Brought to Deposit through the efforts of banker Charles P. Knapp. Let's go inside. This is where the Outing magazine was published. It was geared for the well-heeled outdoorsman. With offices on Fifth Avenue, it was distributed nationwide. Ads for Abercrombie & Fitch and Tiffany & Company could be found on its pages. Also, the publisher of books by prominent authors. Maybe they are working on the first edition of Zane Grey's The Last of the Plainsmen. Yep, the famous Western author was published right here. The Outing baseball team, circa 1900. They were known to play red-hot ball, and among their star players were Zane Grey and his brothers. They are probably in this picture, but alas, no IDs were left for us. The Deposit Pearl Button Company on Cottage Street, where the high school's driveway is. Story goes, if you dig up the street near 2nd and Pine, you will find millions of pearl buttons and shells. We are headed toward that corner now. 48 Pine Street, corner of 2nd. This corner has always been a crossroads, built as an inn for travelers on the Jericho Turnpike, the road to Bainbridge. And when this picture was taken, it was a landmark on old Route 17, the road to New York City. See the sign, lower left? This building remains in good repair. Across the street, and next to S&S Auto Repair, is the Evelyn Wheeler Steinman home. The room with the portrait of Melina is named for her. Earlier, we saw a picture of her son, a member of the first track team. Again, we have a beautiful fence surrounding the house. Let's cross the street again. 44 Pine Street, built for Peter Pine in 1839, and later the home of the Honorable Charles Knapp, who started his private bank in the library before building the bank that is now the museum. Note the lovely fence. Although much changed, the current owner has added a fence, as have several other local homeowners, to bring back the flavor of yesteryear. One of our favorite pictures. It is on the cover of Strolling Through Time. 147 2nd Street, right next door to our little bank. See it on the left? This grand home was built by Charles J. Knapp, son of the first Knapp banker. The medical building occupies this site. Home, sweet home, and the end of our virtual trip back in time, but just the beginning for you to rediscover Deposit, on foot, in a vehicle, or through the pages of our unique history book.